Swarajya Samrajya Vibhutiresha Bhavat Kripa Shri Mahima Prasadat Prapta Maya Shri Gurave Mahatmane Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namastasmai Sadaikasmai Kasmai Chinmahase Namaha Yadetad Vishwarupena Rajati Guru Rajati Yadetad Vishwarupena Rajati Guru Rajati. Hari. See, all of us should understand the role of discipline in our life. Understand means we have to think about it and understand it very well. The more we think about it, we realize the importance of it. Suppose, right from childhood, initially we are not given to any discipline at all. As a baby we do whatever we like and we are allowed to do also. But as soon as we grow, are we not forced by the guardians, by the parents to learn certain things? About food, perhaps even before that we have to learn certain discipline. The mother will force us to take this, take that, or not only whatever the baby likes to take, but whatever is nutritious for the body to grow properly. Initially for the child it is not at all very happy. Whenever he is forced to take something nutritious food, he may not like it, but the mother forces it. Similarly, when he tries to, when it is time to learn the alphabets, the child has to be forced to learn the alphabet, then the grammar, then the language. Now once we learn the language, child has learned the language, then he reads various kinds of books and he enjoys that. He may not remember that it is the discipline in which he was put by his parents. Because of that today he is enjoying the literature. He forgets that perhaps, but he should be reminded by the parents themselves that it is only you had undergone the discipline of knowing the alphabets, the grammar, learning the grammar, learning the literature, that today you are having the freedom in the world of literature. The freedom which you were having at that time, that always to play or with the toys or whatever you wanted to do, that freedom was not a greater freedom, but the freedom you have earned through undergoing the discipline is a greater freedom. We should point out so that they start learning from there that the discipline has given him the freedom. Similarly, in any field, so to say, be it a field of music, be it a field of sports, be it a field of any career, unless we undergo a very regular discipline, we will not be able to have the freedom in that field. A musician will not be able to have the freedom in the world of music unless he undergoes the learning the shrutis and the ragas and all that. A sportsman, what kind of discipline they have to undergo to become a good sportsman? So we should understand the role of discipline in life. So there are, apart from this particular stream, the discipline in various streams, in India, there had been some general disciplines given to the human beings, to the children right from the beginning. Not only children, it is to everybody, so to say. Even the birth, before the birth of the children, during pregnancy, after pregnancy, everywhere we have some disciplines to be followed, which perhaps we have forgotten now, we don't. So those disciplines, some general disciplines have been given to make their life orderly, integrated, so that they have a better life. In that, they have not only considered the gross causality, that is, gross causality means in this world, we know that if I don't study, I don't perform well in the exam, that everybody knows that causality. If I don't perform well in the exam, I don't get a good job or admission in a good college. This we don't have to tell. But there are certain psychological causality also. When we are undergoing some mental discipline, sensory discipline, actually it makes us master of the world, that we don't think. Because normally we are slave to the world. Whatever we like, the senses want, we do that. And the moment something happens which we do not like, immediately we lose our poise, we lose our self-centeredness. So, are we not slave to the circumstances? We are not able to keep our poise, our self-centeredness, which we want to do. Suppose somebody says something which I do not like, immediately we flare up. We say, we also start returning their abuses or whatever. We lose our temper. So, is it not a slavery that any world situation we are not able to, it is not under our control, and we are slave to the situation. We react according to the situation not being under our own control. So that is not a very happy state of human personality. We should understand that. And understanding that, the knowledgeable people in our country, they had given some general discipline so that right from beginning the personality is integrated, it becomes powerful, some strength is given. Here we should understand very well that as the body needs nourishing food, for that giving the nourishing food to the body also we need discipline. We cannot go by our choice of the taste of the tongue. Suppose you the child go on eating only sweets, only chocolates, you will not allow, because it's not nourishing, the teeth will be spoiled, his health will be spoiled. So there also the discipline is given so that the food becomes nourishing. That everybody perhaps understands. All may not follow, but we understand. But there are subtler nourishments necessary for the other aspects of our personality. Suppose it is our mind. For the mind, just the physical nourishment, physical food will not be enough. Mind needs its own nourishment. And what can be the nourishment for the mind, the direct nourishment for the mind? Can you tell me? All thoughts, imaginations, ideals, values, whatever the mind deals with. Suppose you read very good literature where virtues, values are illustrated, or you read the life of some great persons where you find the values in action, so that from the life we see. So any good thoughts, good ideals, virtues, values, when we read about it, when we listen to it, when we think about them, that is the nourishment for the mind. Because the mind goes on absorbing the values and virtues from such thoughts, imaginations, ideals, whatever we listen, whatever we read. So we have to provide enough of such subtle nourishment for the mind to make the mind strong, to make the mind win over the world situations, to make the mind master over its own senses, over the world situations. Similarly, for the intelligence also, there is nourishment for the intelligence. Just only thoughts will not nourish the intelligence. The intelligence has to be made active, discriminating. So you have to provide the discriminatory thoughts to the intelligence, what is good, what is bad. Certain things might be immediately good, but in the long term they turn out to be bad. In our Shastras there is a statement called Shreyas and Preyas. You should remember these two. Shreyas means whatever is ultimately auspicious, which will take you to an auspicious goal where your mind, your personality will be fulfilled. And prayers means whatever is immediately pleasant, maybe very pleasant immediately, but in the long run it will take you away from the auspicious goal. You will become disturbed because there are psychological causalities also. If you do wrong things, the psychology has got its own causality. It will turn back and it will punish your mind. If the mind remains weak, if the mind remains selfish, it will have its own punishment through its own laws. There are subtle laws for that. So this Shreyas and Preyas, the wise people, they will always analyze the situation when we are in a crossroad. Shall I take the path A or shall I take the path B? In their mind they would analyze and then decide whether am I to take A or B, which will take me to Shreyas. I will not be guided only by the prayers, because finally I will be going the wrong way by that. So, this decision the intelligence will have to take. Now the intelligence of a person can be active. Suppose a thief, he is always thinking how to deceive people, how to thieve materials. His intelligence is also working. But it is not working in an auspicious manner because he is harmful to the society, and if anything happens, he will be taken to the prison. Otherwise also he will not be peaceful in his mind because he is constantly deceiving people, harming people. Now that intelligence also is active, but we won't call it a nourishing thought, nourishing analysis for the intelligence. It is also analysis. He is analyzing how to break the lock, a new lock has been put, how to go about it, or how to deceive people without being caught anywhere. So he is always applying his intelligence, but not in an auspicious manner, in a harmless manner. So the intelligence also have to be given thoughts where the intelligence starts thinking in analyzing this Shreyas and Preyas. Where lies my auspicious goal? Where lies where I have to discriminate which path to take and which path not to take. So those thoughts, those analysis, they are all for the growth of the intelligence. So we should understand very well that each aspect of our personality needs a certain, that corresponding discipline. Only food will not nourish our intelligence and mind. They need the subtle mental discipline, mental nourishment and intelligential nourishment. Am I clear? Now like that, this Vishnu Sahasranama also had come. This, what I said is in respect to that. You may know the story, but I will just repeat a little, because this was also given for based on a psychological causality or psychological law, you can say. In Mahabharata war, right in the beginning, before the war started, that Bhagavad Gita you must be knowing, it was given to Arjuna by Krishna just before the war, because his mind was absolutely in turmoil. If you read the first chapter, you will find that he is speaking about dharma, adharma, many things. He is preaching Krishna actually. And he was not humble enough also when Krishna wanted to help him. He said that you become my charioteer. He did not regard Krishna as a guru or as a teacher or as anything respectable. He considered him as a good friend. And he asked him to become charioteer, but Krishna became a charioteer. But when Krishna took him in front of the grandfather, the most beloved grandfather and the most respected teacher from whom Arjuna had learnt his archery, then he understood the consequence of this war, that I have to fight these two people also because they are standing on the enemy side. So his whole idea about the moral codes got shaken. One shloka is there where he is saying, Ahovata mahat papam kattum vyavasita vayam yat rajya sukhalobhena hantum swajana mudyataha. Here I want to point out just one word, even if you don't understand the shloka, doesn't matter. We are out to commit a great sin. He is telling Krishna, as if Krishna doesn't know where lies sin. We are out to commit a great sin because we are going to kill our own people, including my most beloved grandfather and the respected teacher. For what? Yat rajya sukha lobhena. Because of our greed for enjoying the kingship and corresponding happiness. Here there are various assumptions that he is assuming that by fighting the war I will win and I will become a king. And as if the kingship is very comfortable for people. For a good king, it is never comfortable. It's a great responsibility. It's most punishing than any other job. Many of you might be CEO and all. The king is much more punished than a CEO. I mean, the kind of burden a good king will have to bear, it is not at all comfortable or a happy situation. It needs lot of strength in the personality, impersonality. It needs impersonality, impartiality, which has to adorn the personality of a king. He is assuming that a kingship will give him happiness, and the greed for that comfort and luxury and happiness, he is fighting the war. And because of that, he was assailed by the dharma-adharma consideration, and he was not able to fight at all. So Krishna had to take his mind to a dimension of impersonality, where he explained to him that this war you are fighting not for your personal benefit or gain at all. You may die in the process also. You may not live, you may not win the kingdom. But it is a necessity for the sustenance of the society. All the kings have become corrupt, and we need a change. The corrupt kings will have to be dethroned and killed also if necessary. We want to establish again a righteous rule on earth, which was there in our country. The Rajas, they were Rajarshis. They were all having the full knowledge. They were ruling the kingdom very righteously, with impersonality and impartiality. We want to have such kind of civilization again. The whole civilization is moving towards destruction. If the kings are corrupt, then the whole civilization will move towards destruction. I have come to save the civilization, and this war is designed for that. And I want you to fight for establishing a righteous rule on earth, not for you to enjoy the kingdom or gain the kingdom. In the process, you may not be successful. It doesn't matter, but being a Kshatriya, being a warrior, being an administrator, your duty, your role is to fight for establishing the righteous role. The whole orientation got changed. So where is the sin here? You may have to dedicate your life for the benefit of the society. So there is no question of sin coming in at all. And the whole Bhagavad Gita discourse was to awaken Arjuna to this dimension of impersonality, so that he can fight the war even when the necessity is to kill his own grandfather or the teacher. Now after the war, when everything was over, so Karna was the eldest brother of Yudhishthira, and that he did not know. Yudhishthira did not know, Karna knew. So when Kunti came and told him that all have died, they are going to perform the funeral rites, Kunti Devi told Yudhishthira that you perform the rites for your eldest brother Karna also. It was a lightning shock for Yudhishthira. What? He was my eldest brother? And you have concealed this fact from me? Had I known it, I would not have fought the war at all. So he was punished by this so much that Karna, my eldest brother, and I have fought with him and I have killed him. We have killed him. That thought was punishing him so much that he was not able to bear it. He said that I am not interested in ruling the kingdom at all. I will leave the worldly life, go to the forest and do tapas, austerity and all. I am not interested in ruling the kingdom. So he could not be consoled by anybody, including Krishna. Krishna said that I will not be able to do it, but let us go to your grandfather. He is the person who will be able to console you. Now when he went to his grandfather who was lying on the bed of arrows, the Bhishma was still lying on the bed of arrows, and he was told about the suffering Yudhishthira is having. What is to be done? Then Bhishma said that you perform an Ashwamedha Yajna. This Yajna, Ashwamedha Yajna particularly for a king, it will take almost 1 year of preparation. It's a huge festival or sacrifice, so to say. It had various dimensions. One, I will say that it has a great economic dimension also. Those days, whenever the king's coffer would be filled, the chief minister would come and tell the king that, or the finance minister if it was different, he will come and tell the king that our coffer is full, so we need to distribute the wealth. So please perform a great yajna like Ashwamedha Yaga or so. So in that 1 year preparation, so many artisans, so many other people will be putting up pandals, doing festival, this, that, so many performances. For 1 year people will be engaged in preparation for the yajna. And during the yajna also the priest will be performing the yajna. The various people who knew the Shastras, they will read out, they will explain things to people. So the whole wealth which has got accumulated in the kingdom, in the king's coffer, will be distributed amongst the people. There was such an economic insight there. It was never to be hoarded. The wealth, money is never supposed to be hoarded, because if you keep the money idle, money is a dynamic power. That our people understood. Money or wealth, it is a dynamic power. When you utilize it, roll it in the society, it enhances, it gets increased. If you keep it idle, then it is useless. It doesn't have any static power like that. By hoarding money, you don't gain anything. So it has to be rolled in the society. Whether it is gold or whatever wealth, it has to be made, it has to be activated in the society so that it generates further wealth. Only when it is dynamic, it will generate further wealth. Swamiji has put up a case in the Supreme Court of India against that property kept in Trivandrum Padmanabha Swami temple, that so much of gold is not to be accumulated in any temple at all. The gold is supposed to be rolled. And the kings of Kochi Maharaja had utilized the temple wealth for making the railway line there. There are so many instances in illustrations, because those days the king was working under the Padmanabha Swami. They used to think that I am a servant of Padmanabha Swami. So the king's wealth was kept in the temple, but it was not supposed to be hoarded at all. It has a later practice which has caused so much of wealth to be hoarded over there. So Swamiji has put up a PIL, public interest litigation, in Supreme Court, which is now being heard by the judges over there. So the minister will tell the king that we have to perform a yaga and this will happen. There is another thing in it, that such a huge preparation, naturally the king and everybody will get involved in that work. So if Yudhishthira now goes for this Ashwamedha Yaga, then his mind will get busy with so many things and he will perform so many good things, all goodness, and so many people will be benefited by that. That will compensate the sinfulness he is suffering from. See, I wanted to relate the subtle causality there. How the psychological causality works. That he was being punished by some thought of sinfulness. When we do some good work, that compensates the thought of sinfulness. It annuls the thought of sinfulness and the mind becomes free. This is the same thing, our funeral rites at our Shraddha ceremonies are there. There is a great importance in that. Because whatever you may do, however good son you are, there will be some neglect shown to the parents. Because they have become old. And you are still young and you are running around the whole day. So the old people want only some recognition and love. But we are seldom giving it to them, because maybe they are sick, they are lying on the bed. And how will you always support them? You have to go out for work, you have to come back, you have to go for this party, this meeting, that meeting. So neglect will be there. Maybe one day your father wanted to eat something also, some special thing, but you did not have time to buy it or give it, and you forgot thereafter. All these things will be there. Some neglect, some missing gaps, etc. will be there. When the person dies, immediately your mind will start punishing. Oh, father wanted that thing, I did not give it that day, and he has passed away. Father wanted us little support, some good words. Even I could not speak to the father for 1 month. I just saw him and I was feeling always irritated when he was calling me. All these thoughts will be there. Whatever, even if you are a very good child supporting our father, it's not easy, because this is the way. When we know very well that when we grow old, we will also become like that. Knowing that also we are not able to support, because we are busy in so many ways. So, what they do is that at least for after somebody has passed away, you are completely involved in his thoughts, various things which has happened, a full involvement in those thoughts. You suffer, you shed tears, you think of him, you do something for him, whatever he loved you do, you feed people whom he loved, all these things you do for maybe 13 days, 15 days, or maybe after 1 year again, whatever. That will compensate the neglect and the sinfulness your mind has been feeling. So we think that we are giving the pinda for the souls which have departed. Unless we tell them, we will not do. Suppose we say that there is no such soul, you need not give pinda. Or there is no such soul, you will not give that. But the whole thing is designed in a manner that thinking of the soul, you do that. Whether that soul is eating your pinda or not, it does not matter. It can never be proved, it can never be disproved also. Disprove in this case can be done because that will remain there. Only a crow will come and take, and he will think that it is considered a very good auspicious sign when the crows come and take. Because you consider the father's atma has come and taken. But the fundamental purpose, all these are designed by wise people to relieve you of your psychological causal sinfulness by introducing a reverse action. The negative karma is annulled by the positive karma done, so that your mind becomes free. So, Bhishma advised Yudhishthira to perform the Ashwamedha Yaga to get rid of this suffering, the fire of sinfulness he was suffering from. Now after this instruction, Yudhishthira asked that, well, I am a king and I can perform this kind of an Ashwamedha Yaga because I have the means to do it. Rajas will be able to do it. But what about the ordinary people? When their mind suffers from similar or some other mental repercussions, when their psychology is suffering, what are they supposed to do? Then Bhishma said, for them is Vishnu Sahasranama is given for that. So this was given, there he is saying that this was advised by Parameshwara to Parvati. That is taking it for another few thousand years or to eternity. But when Bhishma is saying, it is already existing. And when Bhishma gave it to Yudhishthira, already it is 5,000 and odd years old. So how anything is preserved for such a long time, we should not neglect it. Anything which lasts for such a long period, 5,000 and odd years, it's not easily imaginable. American civilization has lived only for how many? About 400 years maximum. So can you imagine of 5,000 years old civilization, or even much more than that, 5,000 years also it was at its peak. So we don't know how, it is a prehistoric civilization and still all these things are preserved intact. Suppose the literature which was created even 100 years or 200 years ago, they are no more valid, they are no more appreciated by people. In many cases the language has undergone a change. The Malayalam, I hear that even 50 years ago, whatever Malayalam was there, it has changed so much that the present children are not able to understand. During Mao Zedong's time, I had heard that he was a poet and he had written many poems, but the people during his time, the children during his time, the language, Chinese language had undergone so much of change that they were not able to understand Mao Zedong's poem. That means so fast the language undergoes a change. But this Sanskrit is preserved for 5, 10 or even more thousands of years, we don't know. It is intact, or even now we are able to understand. And our Indians have made it a dead language. This is the only living language, so to say. And they call it a dead language. They don't want to introduce in the school also. So, since Vishnu Sahasranama also is part of this heritage which has been preserved for more than 5,000 years, we should understand that it has some inherent strength, otherwise it would not have been. Suppose any classical music, etc., they are also living for more than 2,000 years or 3,000 or even more than that because of its inherent strength. Why the modern songs are changing every 100 years, it completely changes. 100, even 20 years it changes. So, this instruction, whatever they had given, our people have preserved. Our lineage, our predecessors, they have preserved this heritage and given to us. Now this was primarily given to redress the mind of its vagaries. It may not be always because of somebody fought with the brother or anything of that sort, but to strengthen the mind so that it can withstand its vagaries. Now how will it work in our case? You will find that unless you sit straight, your pronunciation will not be correct. You will not be able to pronounce the aspirations, say visargas, the visargas and all, even yuktaksharas, the joint letters properly, unless you sit straight and breathe properly, it will not come. Then, while chanting, suppose the Sanskrit is such a language that to chant, it's all extremely phonetic. So you know the position of the tongue for bringing out each sound. So suppose the sound is not coming fully, say bha is not coming fully as bha. It is coming as ba, close to ba. I am saying because Tamilians have that problem, pa, pa, ba, ba, and I mean all the aspiration, the accented ones, like kha, 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 tha comes almost as da, ta. Bha does not come fully, it comes as bhuta should be bhuta, dharayati, dha. Those do not come properly. So we have to, how to pronounce fully each letter, it needs lot of attention. Actually, before coming, I was teaching an Australian, this Vishnu Sahasranama, a few months back. And initially for some time, I only tried the letters, that what are the position of the tongue. I prepared some drawings. I think they are there in soft copies also. So what should be the angle of suppose we have 3 sa, sha, sha. Now in the sa, tongue should be flat on the teeth. In the sha, the last one, the tongue should be having a 90-degree bend, touching the murdna, going right upwards, then sha will come. And in between the sha, the tongue will be at 45 degree. Now even if we tell, initially they will not be able to do. Our Swamiji sometimes puts a pencil in the mouth when he teaches the children, because they will not be able to make it. So to make the tongue bend properly, he will put pencil or something underneath the tongue and then pronounce. Finally, once the sound comes, then he will discover, this is the position of the tongue which will bring out this particular sound. So it is not only sa, sha, sha, but in many other cases, all the vargaksharas, that is the 5 letters, it doesn't come properly always. Dukkha, often now also I heard, you say dukkha. The kha doesn't come properly. Dukkha. So, we will write that ka, then ka is ka with aspiration. And we will put some symbol for that so that any foreigner can remember it very well. That ka, from ka to kha, progress from ka to kha, you only add an aspiration like ha, ha, ka, kha. But when I say that, they will say ka. So that becomes ka visarga, not kha. So you have to say that you cannot say ka because that is a visarga. You have to say that ha also together with the ka. So make the gutter like this, put the force here at this point, open it more. Generally they will not open the mouth fully. Because of their English accent, they don't open. So open it more. Now put some pressure here, put some pressure there. Like that we have to train up. So you can understand how difficult it is first to bring out the Sanskrit alphabets themselves. It is not the difficulty part I am mentioning, the attention needed. So much of discipline needed that you have to be absolutely attentive. So you will forget all other things. If you have some desires also, that will be forgotten. Everything will be forgotten. The mind will be focused on that. Now that is the letter part. Then you have learned the words also, they have to be properly done. Then when the joined words come, you have to know, in various cases the immortal will become mortal, because amara and mara, just because of the accent, it will go wrong. Mrityu and amrityu, all these things will go wrong. So you have to know where yesterday I was correcting something, na? Bhagavad Gita somewhere. Because just because of the accent, the meaning becomes reverse. That is what happened to Kumbhakarna. Because he wrongly pronounced, he started sleeping. It was a wrong pronunciation which made him sleep all the time like that. So, it has to be, the joint letters have to be properly understood, known, and while reading you have to understand them. So you have to learn under some teacher who will point out to you, no, it is not like that, you cannot put an accent there. And in many cases, if you learn it wrongly, nobody can correct it anymore. Once you have learned it wrongly and it has got settled in your, and you have grown old, no correction can be made. It's very difficult, it becomes. So right from the beginning, from the childhood, when Vishnu Sahasranama is taught generally in traditional families, the boy will have to undergo these disciplines to learn things properly. It does not end there. Suppose some Ucharana is coming wrongly. You have to listen to your own Ucharana, your own pronunciation sound, and know that it has gone wrong. This is the first step. You have to understand that I have pronounced wrongly. Second, you have to understand what has gone wrong. What is the wrong thing? Once the wrong sound comes, you have to detect that I have uttered wrongly, I have chanted wrongly. Then you have to understand what has gone wrong, where the correction needs. This, even if you tell we have found that it is not possible, so we record in a recorder and play it back to the student. Then only he or she will understand that where I am going wrong. Because while listening the attention, it only means that while we are chanting, the attention is not so sharp as to detect my own faults or mistakes. We have to listen another time from a recorder to play it to us to detect where I have gone wrong. Then also attention will be needed, but not so much as while you are chanting. So many people are not able to. For them, they have to listen from a recorder. Now, once you have done that also, the Yuktaksharas also you have learned, then you have to understand to some extent the meaning. Otherwise, the accents will go wrong. You may pronounce as such properly, but just because of the accent, the Mrityu may appear as Amrityu may appear as Mrityu, or the Ashoka may appear as Shoka. So you have to understand the meaning of it. Then if you want to improve it further, you have to understand the underlying philosophy also. Like, what are the word meanings? Suppose the word is Mahakarta. Now if you say Mahakarta, it won't have the Maha there. To say Maha means great. Will you say a great country? Will say a great country. You won't say a great country, you will say great country. So in Sanskrit also, the words we have to know what does it mean in principle, in broad sense, so that the proper chanting comes out. So much of attention is needed. And this attention, particularly Visargas, we have found people don't chant the Visargas because it needs lot of breathing power, aspiration is needed. Not only that, the further refinement will come that suppose we use only this portion of the vocal system, the word will not have the depth. Only when you use the whole sound box we are given, when that is used, the word will have, the pronunciation will have its depth. In music also, suppose there are people who are singing only from here, they will not have the depth of the sound. To have the depth, you have to produce a sound. We say navel, from the navel it should originate, that kind of a sound. It should have enough bass, it should go down to that level, from there it should rise. Then only it will have its full effect. You will find that effect drastically changes when you have used the whole sound system, the sound box that is produced the sound from the navel. You will find it has great transforming effect on your own mind as well as the minds of others. There lies the difference in the chanting or music of different people. It will have very high transforming effect when the sound is brought out in the proper manner from the proper place. So much of attention is needed, so much of learning is needed to do it. And if we undergo during our young days or childhood or young days, so naturally the mind will have to undertake, mind, intelligence, attention, everything. They will undergo such an integration. At least if half an hour a day you can do it, that integration will be there in your mind throughout the day in your work. And whatever you are doing, that integrated mind will have much more efficiency than a distracted mind, a chaotic mind, a disorderly mind. That I don't have to explain, I think everybody will understand. So it is basically the importance of discipline we should understand, and as a discipline this is given, that Vishnu Sahasranama is a great discipline. If you chant properly, sitting straight with the proper pronunciation, definitely after getting up you will feel energized, light, because the rhythm, the meter is set in such a manner that it introduces a pranayama in the system. You don't have to close your nose and do the pranayama. This itself, if you pronounce properly with the proper accent, the whole being will undergo a pranayama. Pranayama means a disciplined breathing. Without that you will not be able to chant properly. With the visargas will not come, the accents will not come, the meter will go wrong here, there. So do it with the proper accent, proper ucharana, proper meter. You have to undergo, the breathing process will have to undergo a pranayama process, that is discipline. And that makes you feel energized and very light after the chanting. If after chanting you feel like a defeated soldier almost sleeping off, that means you have not chanted properly. Be sure about it. You have to correct your chanting. Because it should not deplete you of the energy, although it needs lot of energy. But it's a process of energization by setting your breathing in a manner that the prana increases, the life forces increase. So that is the general exercise purpose of Vishnu Sahasranama. Now, I will go to the further philosophical aspect of it. This Vishnu, although they have given a picture of Vishnu with 4 hands, with symbolic ayudham and all those things are there, but they have at the same time used the word Vishnu. Vishnu, the word means Vyapnoti iti Vishnu, which is all pervading. Now, one which is all pervading, that cannot be only 400, like that means if you consider that Vishnu, then here there is no Vishnu, there is no Vishnu. But truly speaking, it is given as an aid initially. But when you advance, you have to conceive of Vishnu as all pervading reality, the consciousness, their meaning, which is our Atma also. All pervading means he is right within us also. We can experience him only within us. We cannot experience him here or there. Although he is everywhere, rather everything is in him. Now that is why you find that it starts with Vishwam Vishnur Vashatkaraha. That Vishwam is the first word in this chanting. Vishwam means the whole universe. Because if the universe is not there, the consciousness, there will be nobody to know the consciousness. The whole universe is an expression, a manifestation of consciousness, or the Lord you can say. The Vishwa, the universe, is the body of the Lord. You cannot find Lord anywhere other than the universe. So the universe is a gross expression of the Lord. So that is why if you worship Vishnu, you cannot hate any other idol also, because he is all pervading, he is all inclusive. If you are worshipping Vishnu, you are not supposed to have enmity or hatred towards anybody at all, because everything is Vishnu. So we have to understand in its great dimension. Like that, each word, Vishwam, then comes Vishnu. That first is the world, the entire universe. Then this entire universe is only appearing in the consciousness or the Atma or Paramatma or Brahman. That is the Vishnu. So Vishnu is the support, the substratum of the entire universe. Then comes Vashatkara. Vashatkara comes in sacrifices of yajna that you offer, and it ends with a Vashat, with like Swaha, it ends with a Vashat. That means you are, this sacrifice, although mechanically it is, you are offering some pulses or something or fire or wood into the fire or ghee into the fire. What is happening is that the gross item is becoming subtle by that. When you are offering to the fire, the gross items are no more found. It is all becoming smoke and fragrance and all. So it is getting converted into a subtle item. So any offering is such that it should make the gross subtle. So although we are doing anything in the work, the whole work, whatever we are doing throughout the day, we should remember that it is an offering to the yajna of the universal Lord. Whatever is happening in this universe, it is a yajna of the Lord. Yajna means like the fire offering. It is the the moon is going around the earth is running around the sun, there are galaxies getting destroyed, the galaxies getting born, the whole thing, all the activities, they consist of this activities of Vishnu. They are all offering to Vishnu. Like that, we puny human beings, are we doing anything different? We are product of nature. And nature has given us also some abilities, some limbs, some other abilities, intelligence, self-will, etc. With that, whatever we can do, if we can consider it as an offering to that universal yajna, then we will be rid of our constriction, of our ego, of our selfishness and everything. So that Vishnu itself is Vashatkaraha. When we think of that universal dimension, our mind simply, it will vanish, it will expand into the space. We will acquire a spatial dimension within. We will be freed of all constrictions, all selfishness, all kinds of suffering will automatically go. So each word is a tablet, that in the 1,000 names, each word, if you analyze properly, it will take you to that transcendental level where you no longer remain a puny human being encapsulated in your body, mind, personality, fragmented from all others, different from all others. Every tablet, every nama that of the 1,000 nama, if you understand it properly, think about it properly, it will take you to that universal dimension, that I become the universe. You will have that spatial dimension, even more than the space, the sky-like dimension you will have. So it is a transcendental pursuit at each nama. That 1,000 namas are given 1,000 ways of thinking about it. There are some namas there which is talking about what Krishna did or what Vishnu did. There also we should go into the story and find out what is the significance. You will find that it is taking to you the transcendental dimension. So each name will take you to this transcendental universal dimension. That is the purpose of it, if you take it to the full. That is why you cannot chant it with a very disturbed mind or so. You will not be able to. Your mind has to get rid of the suffering or disturbances automatically. That is why in the first verse, the Dhyana Shloka, you are saying, Shuklam Baradharam Vishnum Shashivaranam Chaturbhujam. When you are thinking of a Shuklambara, the white dress, and the shining face, moon-like face, it means all the fragmented appearance, that so many colors, differences, differential attitude, all these are gone. You are thinking of something white, uniform color. The mind is taken to uniformity. Then he says, Prasanna Vadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantayet. If you think of the Prasanna Vadana, means the smiling, it is not just smiling, it is a placid face. Prasanna means placid. If you think of placid face of Vishnu, forget about Vishnu. If you can think of placid face of anybody, even if your son, immediately the mind will become placid. Will it not? Suppose you see, if you think of the smiling face of somebody, you will find, you put a mirror, you will have started smiling. You have any doubt about it? The moment we think, that mind has to completely think about the smiling face. Automatically you will start smiling. So when you are thinking of the placid face of Vishnu, your mind will automatically become placid. And with that placid mind, you start your japa. I think I can stop when it's already 8:33. If you have questions, I can reply.
Pranam. Unfortunately, I don't have the advantage of listening to your earlier lectures, but still I was thinking, since you mentioned religion and spirituality, so now today what we heard, does it go under religion or spirituality, or both overlapping?
See, basically this chanting of Vishnu Sahasranama will be considered as religious practice, because it is a regular ritualistically we do. But the way I have interpreted, I have taken the religious practice to the spiritual dimension. That we can always do. Any religious ritual can be taken to the spiritual dimension, where we go to the final wisdom aspect of it. Because we are given to wisdom, we would always like to explain everything in terms of wisdom finally. It is an overlap of the two, you can say that way, that's fine. See, even the other day I was speaking that a simple ritual which people do mechanically without understanding, that in Bengal we have the Durga Puja for 4 days. So the last day before the immersion of the idol, first of all we make the idol with clay, then institute the life in it, worship it as an idol, and after 4 days we immerse it in the river or lake, whatever is available. Now before the immersion, we have a ritual which is very beautiful. It is called Darpana Visarjana. Visarjana means immersion. Darpana means mirror. So people, because of their affinity for that 4 days of festivity and puja and offering and so many things, they really fall in love with the Devi. Many people shed tears the day Devi is taken away. But can we always keep a Devi outside and continue to do that? Because we have to get back to our work. We cannot keep the Devi outside like that. And truly speaking, the Devi has to be installed in our heart. And we have to go with that. So what do? They go around, circumambulate the Devi 3 times, and then there is a huge plate kept in front where there is water, and at the center bottom is a small metallic mirror is kept. You have to see Devi's face in that mirror. That's the last vision you have of the Devi. The meaning is that the water is like our mind, and underneath the mind is our consciousness. We call it Chidabhasa, where the consciousness is reflected. That is our Atma, we say, our I. So we have to install Devi in that, our own Atma, where from the I is coming. So they have given this ritual to do it, that you see in the mirror the Devi's Murti, and for that the water has to be still. As long as the water is disturbed, you will not be able to see. Like that, as long as the mind is disturbed, you will not be able to see the real form of your Atma. So you install Devi from that clay model to your own heart, where from your I-ness is coming. The Devi is not different from your I. Everything is that. And then you immerse the idol. Now this practice, I think most of the people they do it, but they don't go into it. It needs somebody to explain that this is what is the meaning, and you should keep Devi in your heart throughout the year till again regeneration is necessary, because they know that you will not keep her in your heart. So again Devi has to appear outside to remind you that I should be in your heart. All these are designed with lot of wisdom. All rituals are designed by the wise people. So we should not neglect them, but we should get promoted from those rituals to the wisdom level. That we always say that you cannot say that I will remain in the primary school, I don't want to go to the secondary school. 7 I will remain in 7, I don't want to go to 8. It is just like that. I will remain with the rituals, I will remain with the worship, I will not go to the wisdom level. Refuse to move. That is where we commit mistake. That we should get promoted as the time comes. And any discipline in the name of ritual undergone beforehand will help us to go to the wisdom level, because it needs a very disciplined, integrated mind, intelligence, personality. So to undergo that discipline, we have the rituals beforehand. But it doesn't mean that if you have not done the rituals, you will not be able to undertake that. If your mind and intelligence and your being is already disciplined, then you can straight away go for that. All need not, but by the general run of people, they have to discipline through the rituals and then go over to that. That is why they are there. In Kathopanishad, which I am going to take tomorrow and day after for about, I think it's a long session, 4 hours or so. To the extent possible we will cover. There, Nachiketa is a 7-year-old boy, and his father is a very rich householder who had done all kinds of yaga, yajna. He is doing a great yajna by which he will ensure his heaven after the body falls. But in his yaga, yajna, he is doing everything wrongly, because his mind is miserly. He is giving offering to the priest who performed the yaga. He is giving cows which will never yield anymore, cows which have eaten up their grass forever, cows with one horn. All the defective cows he is clearing off his shed by giving to the offering to the priest. So naturally, although he has performed all the yaga yajnas, he has not got the benefit of performing them, because all yaga yajnas they have to give liberally, so that the mind expands, the mind becomes liberal. But if you do it flouting the Vedic injunctions, then you don't get the benefit of performing them. So it is shown very clearly that he was not at all fit for knowledge at all. Whereas Nachiketa, 7-year-old, he had not done any of these rituals at all. But he had Shraddha. Seeing his father, the Upanishad says, Shraddha avivesha. Shraddha dawned in Nachiketa's mind. This Shraddha, one word, if you remember, it is enough. Bhagavad Gita says, Shraddha mayoyam purushaha yo yat shraddha saeva saha. Shraddha mayaha ayam purushaha yaha yat shraddha saeva saha. He says a human being is only embodiment of his shraddha. That is, you may think that I am tall, I am fat, I am thin, all these things, body, etc. You are not really that. You are what your Shraddha is. Shraddha means whatever you assign value, the supreme value in life. Suppose you value money to be the supreme, then always you will think of money. You will go and worship the moneyed people, ask for their favor. You will always look for having more and more money. You will be always interested in money. So your mind is full of money. So you are an embodiment of money because your Shraddha is for money. Suppose you look for fame, you assign maximum value to fame. Then always you will look for fame. How can I become more famous this way, that way, doing this, doing that. So you become an embodiment of fame only. Like that, whatever yo yat shraddha saeva saha, whatever your shraddha is, you become that. Suppose you consider Lord or this spiritual growth or the spiritual aim to be the supreme in life, supreme goal, then you have to put it in the supreme position. Whatever we consider God to be supreme, we say God is supreme, but we give him the last position. After everything is over, if there is time, I will think of you. Otherwise, not necessary till I am in danger. It is that everywhere. So we have to give supreme, if we are considering Lord or the spiritual growth or this ultimate aim of human life to be the supreme, then we have to give it the supreme pedestal in our life. That Shraddha has to be there. So he says Nachiketa had that Shraddha. That Shraddha dawned in Nachiketa's mind. He thought that what my father is doing is absolutely wrong. Now he had not done the Yaga Yajna, but he had some initial lessons of Dharma, that what is the righteous code. So that is how he went to Yamaraja, and the whole Upanishad, the discourse is given to Nachiketa, not to his father. Vajashravas was his father's name. The discourse is not to the Vajashravas, but to Nachiketa. Now you will say that Vajashravas did so much of ritual, but he was not fit. But Nachiketa did not do any ritual, but he was fit. So there is 2-3 chapters are there to show that Nachiketa was fit, to show how was Nachiketa's mind, how free of desires his mind was, how was his thinking, what was his conception about the truth. Everything is discussed in the first few chapters. Then only the discourse starts. So one can be, without doing the rituals also one can be fit. And after doing the rituals also one may not be fit. If he has not done it properly, the benefit will not be there. So we have to in any case get promoted from the achara or ritualistic level to the wisdom level.
Pranam Swamiji. Yeah, you spoke about Vishnu Sahasranama in terms of calming the mind. So
it is not calming the mind. It is for integrating the whole personality. Yeah. Not only mind, intelligence, body, senses, the whole personality gets integrated. Integrated means they all become very much harmonized, uniform together. Normally always there will be a clash with our mind and intelligence, senses and the mind. There will be internal clashes going on. So by that half an hour of attention on all the faculties, it puts us in a state of integration and a breathing discipline also, pranayama.
So my question is twofold. One is most of the rituals and mantras, is that the primary purpose of it, is to provide that harmonious calming of mind and intelligence?
Yes.
And then if so, and what is the next step after that? I mean, after you accomplish it, so to say, by practicing it.
Next step, as I was saying, that after the rituals you have to look for the truth. That, say, I have been worshipping the Lord for 40 years. Have I ever thought whether Lord has come nearer to me or I have gone nearer to Him? All other things we look for causality. Suppose I go on eating food, but the stomach, the hunger doesn't go. Will you not doubt the food that am I really eating? Or we always question it. Suppose you go on walking, but you not reach anywhere. After 1 hour you find that you are in the same place. Will you not doubt your legs that whether I am walking or not? But in doing all these rituals or worship, we never question that I have been worshipping for 40 years. Have I come closer to God? Or is God there? Or He is not there? If at all He is there, can He be realized? Can He be known? If at all He can be known, in what manner He can be known? And who am I who is looking for God? So all these enquiries should dawn after pursuing. Then you will change over to vichara or the introspection or the knowledge orientation. That is the next step. Is it okay? But we should not refuse to take the next step. There is no conflict at all. One should get promoted from the ritual to the knowledge.
Swamiji, I have a very simple question. It's a personal question. There are a number of options when you pray. One option is you can have a long prayer to Vishnu. The other option is you can simply recite Maha Mantra, or one can recite a simple mantra like Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. I want to know which is the best under what circumstances. How would you compare these different approaches?
I will tell you. Sit.
Thank you.
See, it will need, for each person it will be different. The need will be different it will depend on your need, first of all. Now, generally speaking, a smaller mantra is the better mantra. Because long mantra you will not be able to chant constantly, even when you are active or so. Not only that, mantra, we should understand the meaning of mantra. Mantra comes from manana trayate iti mantra. If you just go on repeating the word, like japa we say, just we go on repeating without focusing on the meaning, then it is not called mantra japa. It's only sound japa. It will have some effect, like they say that as the ants are moving over a stone, for decades and decades the ants are moving over one stone. So because of that constant motion, there will be a mark on the stone left. Have you seen? It happens like that. So that kind of an effect will be there if you do it just mechanically, uttering the sound going on like that. More than that will not be there generally. So any mantra, to have the full effect, we have to do the manana on that meaning. Manana trayate iti mantra. So the more focus will be on the meaning of the mantra. Say when you are saying Namah Shivaya or Om Namo Vasudevaya, whatever it is. Now when you are saying that Namaha, first of all you have to keep in mind what is the meaning of Namaha. It is not giving a Sashtanga long like that. Namaha means humility. That I am nobody. Whatever you have given, O Lord, wherever you take me, I am going like that. I have no doership in that. I cannot know. And truly speaking, it is so. I am a product of the nature created by you. Whatever you have given, with that, whatever possible I do. So this is a feeling of surrender. Surrender does not mean that you will not apply your self-effort. You will do, but without ego. Without the egoistic doership. I am doing this, I did that, I will do this. All those things are nonsense. Nature has given us some capability. According to that, whatever the need of the society, we will do whatever is possible for us. If nature had not provided those, we would not have been able to do. We should remember. So it's a bhava, you understand? The emotion of surrender to bring in that. When we are saying Namaha, we should have that humility or the feeling of surrender in us. And Shiva, Namah Shivaya, if we are saying, the Shiva represents the auspiciousness, or you can say the Atma actually. The ultimate meaning of Shiva is the Atma. That is the consciousness in us. That is the auspiciousness. So when you are saying Namah Shivaya, actually you are surrendering to that auspicious consciousness which is present everywhere in the universe. So if that is there in the mind, it will not be possible throughout the day, you will not be able to do that. At least some part of the day, say half an hour or 1 hour, you have to sit and you have to fully devote to this meaning. Now once you have done it with the meaning, with the focus on the meaning, throughout the day in the background of your mind that japa will go on. It is called ajapa japa, that it's not sound, no sound is necessary. You will find that you are doing something with full attention, even then behind, with the breathing the japa is going on. So in effect that meaning which you have devoted to, that meaning is still working in your mind. Always that surrender, feeling of the auspiciousness will work in your mind. And that will have a great effect in your all interactive life as well as the progress in the spiritual path. Now if you take a very big one, you will not be able to utilize it throughout the day like that. But suppose you have enough time, you don't have anything else to do lot of chanting. You can, not only a mantra, you can chant a full Upanishad also, or a Bhagavatam or whatever. Then you can practice your small mantra, japa, whatever you have, because the mind will get concentrated by all that. Does it answer your point, or you want something else?
Swamiji, this is a question from the webcast
Achha.
and a continuation from yesterday actually. It's from Jana. This is in relation to, her question is, if you get rid of all idol, how do we celebrate Navratri and Vinayaka Chaturthi, Saraswati Puja, etc.? What do we do on those days?
I am not asking to get rid of all idols. You can keep one idol which you want, and if you want some festival which is not belonging to that idol, you have to go to a family where that idol is there. Why do you have to preserve all? You can go to a temple and have the festival. That puja room is not meant for festival, it is meant for daily puja. As just now I said that Durga puja, the Durga is made and immersed. It is not kept in the house throughout the year. We are not supposed to keep it. In many places, I think here only I have found that Durga idol they keep throughout the year. It should not be kept actually. It should be immersed. So festival idols, whatever we do, that should not be preserved at all. After the festival we should install, we can incorporate this ritual of Darpana Visarjana everywhere, do it and install the idol in your heart and immerse the idol. But puja room is meant for only one, something wherever you have your focus, because the purpose of the puja is to make the divergent mind convergent. That we should not forget. By whatever we can make, the mind is always clinging to multifarious variety of the world. How to make that mind understand and be to dwell in the uniformity, the one singular truth, or say transcendental truth. Unless we start converging the mind to one-pointedness, this one-pointedness is extremely important in spiritual growth. The mind has to be made one-pointed. For that you select only one of the 108. You have more than 1,000, no? Jana, how many does she have? Jana has still more, about 2,000 or so. So she has to select one.
Would you suggest which one to choose out?
No, that depends on the person. If you like Rama, you take Rama. If you like Krishna, you take Krishna. If you like Shiva, you take Shiva. Whatever. If you have your guru, we don't keep any idol, we keep only guru's photograph. Yeah. When you have a real guru, when you have guru bhakti, you don't go for any idol at all. But one, I still remember, not in India, outside in one place, I will not say the name of the place. We had visited, we were staying there also. They had made a very decorative, huge asana, the what do you call the puja room, that mandapam. Beautifully decorated woodwork, very good woodwork and huge, where more than 1,000 gods and goddesses were sitting in. So we were taken to see the new puja room with that. We saw and looked anywhere, all around, and then finally Ma said that nowhere I am finding Swamiji. Because they are initiated disciples of Swamiji. So, she said that all the gods and idols are there, Swamiji is nowhere there. Then she says very innocently, Ma, can you tell me where I can keep Swamiji? So many, it is all full. So we had to clear off a place to keep Swamiji.
Swamiji, I have a question. My question is on Vishnu Sahasranamam. See, many of us chant Vishnu Sahasranamam not necessarily sitting in one place, but when we are doing other work, say in the kitchen, or even when we are driving. Is it all right to chant? Because you said so many other things.
Additionally, it is okay. It cannot be it cannot be a replacement for chanting, sitting every day, half an hour or so. Additionally, you can do, that is okay. That is as a bonus, you can do it. But you cannot replace it by the original one. That you have to sit, otherwise how can you have a proper effect? You can do, but that just like puja, God will not come near, He will not go near, like that it will go on.
Swamiji, was the original purpose of all these idols being created to help mankind focus on a single object?
To make one-pointed, that is why we say that we had 33 crores of gods and goddesses. Actually, when it was said, 33 crores was the population of India. It only means that each person will have, although there might be millions of people worshipping Shiva, the concept of Shiva in each person is different from what he has in the other. So it does not matter whatever the idol is. That meaning is that whatever the idol is, it is your concept of the mind. What we want to do is that making that as your focus, you make your mind one-pointed. That purpose has to be served. That you have to find Shiva in everything in that case. Even in your enemy you have to install Shiva. Now naturally the enmity will go. You may fight, even then the enmity will not be there. That is what in Bhagavad Gita they did. So if you install your most beloved idol everywhere, then your mind will become free of ragadvesha and all other vagaries and all. So the purpose is to, whatever you like, whatever is the concept in your mind, but make your mind one-pointed and install that one point, whatever you are considering to be supreme, everywhere you install that, so that the mind becomes uniform. In spite of the variety of the world, your mind remains seated on the one single truth. Because finally you have to go to that transcendental one single truth. It's clear? Shall we stop? Prabuddham vimuktam vikaradihinam prasannam sada nityabodhasvarupam param nischalam nirgunam sarvarupam bhajeham sadanusmarami pranomi Prabuddham vimuktam vikaradihinam prasannam sada nityabodhasvarupam param nischalam nirgunam sarvarupam bhajeham sadanusmarami pranomi.